What are the common misconceptions that people have about your work in pottery and ceramics?
So in terms of the actual pieces, it's really fascinating. But a lot of people ask me if they can use it, and they ask me things like if this will melt, if this can be washed, uh, and it's a general I think people just assume because it's some one person making it by hand and it's not made in the factory, they feel like it's not permanent or it's not going to be sturdy. I've had people ask me questions like, will the handle come off? And things like that. So I mean, of course, it doesn't happen so much on my social media because they see a lot of process that goes into it, and I talk a lot about products, and I also use them in my daily life, so they see that it's being used. But this question comes a lot when people visit from the outside and they see the products, and they always have this little doubt whether it's usable or not. That. Secondly, in terms of profession, a lot of people assume that it's my hobby and it's like a side thing that I'm doing. Either a side profession or just a hobby till, I figure out what I want to do. So that's very difficult to convince people.
I got that a lot with photography as well.
Yeah.
The common thing that I would get was, so I tell someone that I was a photographer, and they said, "What are you going to do next? Are you going to be a movie cameraman?" And I'm like, "That's not a natural progression to go from photography to a motion picture cameraman." Yeah.
Yeah. So it's still difficult to explain people what I'm doing, and people still assume, and a lot of people still tell me, that now I need to hire like 10 people and open a factory and do things like that because that's the only way to grow. So it's very difficult for them to understand that why I want to sit and make every piece myself.
So I have two questions to ask you at this point. The first one is related to the misconceptions of your job. If you simply Google Indian potter or you Google pottery in India or anything like that, the images that comes up in Google is a man doing pottery in a village at a wheel, right? So is this something that is this one of the misconceptions that people ask you about, or is this something that doesn't really come into play at all?
So surprisingly, I haven't been asked this much, but pottery is a traditional practice that goes back ages, right? And hundreds of years. And traditionally, actually, in the villages, even today in India, women are not allowed to sit on the wheel. This is what I read somewhere. That it's mostly the men who do the wheel work, and it's the women who do all the decoration work on the pots. So, typically, yes, that is the scenario. But this is not a question that I get a lot because again, I think it's also the environment that they see me in. The wheels are a little bit different. We use the electric wheel now in urban areas. The clay is also different. It's glazed stoneware. So this particular thing hasn't come up so much in conversation. Literally, it is the men who used to work on the wheel.
Okay. So the next question that I had in mind, which was sort of touching upon what you talked about earlier, where you were talking about people telling you that you need to hire a lot of people and then set up almost like a production line of a factory, right? Um, how how many people right now work with you? Does anyone work with you, or are you like a one person operation?
So currently, I work alone. I've been I've been working alone for the last 4 years. Eventually, one of the major goals after shifting to a studio space was also to hire one help. And the reason for that is that pottery is a very physical work, and there's a lot of work that goes in every piece that doesn't really require me to be present or the creative aspect of it. So there's a lot of sanding and cleaning the pieces and waxing the pieces before and after every process. So and also packing and all of that takes a long time. So the plan is to start with one person first, and then eventually, I mean, I'm not sure how I want to take it forward, but if let's say if I have to expand a team, I would actually try and get some of the traditional potters because there are lots of these villages now. where people don't do pottery anymore. They are traditionally potters, but they're not working anymore.
Okay.
Also, when you see terracotta, mostly they make these gamlas, which are planters, and diyas, especially during Diwali, right? So I think in future, in a few years, if I can take them, train them in stoneware, get them to make modern things, which they can also earn a lot more money than they do for their terracotta pieces. I think that is one aspect of my business that I would like to grow in, because
Hmm.
I know that I don't want to get into the big mass manufacturing factory sort of a setup yet.
Yeah.
Because I've seen the factory running very, very closely at Ferrolinkas, and I've seen how much it takes you to run a factory. And I don't want to lose touch with my creative side of the business. So I
Sure.
don't know. It'll be very difficult to balance both if I go the factory way. If I can work with a small cluster and also hopefully help them benefit from it, that will be probably the way I would like to go forward. But that's a few years down the line. I mean, I've only
Right.
been doing this full time for 1.5 years. So I need to sort of settle this, streamline this, and then think of how to grow further.
Yeah, and it's all the more impressive, or it's really nice to hear that, as you said, after just 1.5 years of doing this full time, that you have now been able to set up your own studio space, and that's also where you're sitting right now, and that's something that you did recently.
Yeah, so I've been in this space for 2 weeks. It's actually not completely done up yet.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
so there's still some work left. And again, when I quit in 2019, I knew that the next step is to move out of home and have a separate space, because it's also very dusty, very messy, requires space. And I kept referring back to the same conversation I had with my dad when I wanted the kiln, and when he said that it's a business investment that you have to do if you have to grow. So
Yeah.
you might think that you're spending more than you can, but it's all an investment and which will fetch you more later on. So don't worry about that. Just take that leap of faith.